The autumn breeze swept through the streets of Seoul as Haejin Park stared at her reflection in the law firm's window. Her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted her blazer, the material smooth beneath her touch. Another late night at the office had left dark circles under her eyes, but that didn't matter now. The dating app on her phone had chimed for the 5th time that evening, persistent in its attempts to catch her attention. For 3 years, Haejin had devoted herself entirely to corporate law, climbing the ranks at one of Seoul's most prestigious firms. At 28, she had everything she'd worked for, except someone to share it with. Her mother's weekly calls about marriage had become more frequent, and even her younger sister had started dropping hints about setting her up with nice boys from her university. The dating app, Starlink, had appeared seemingly overnight. Its advertisements were everywhere: subway stations, television commercials, and social media. The interface was unlike anything Haejin had seen before, with sleek designs that seemed to shimmer and move on their own. The questions it asked were oddly specific: blood type, family medical history, genetic predispositions. Haejin had attributed it to Korean society's obsession with compatibility. As she walked home that evening, the streets of Gangnam glittered with neon signs and the warm glow of street food stalls. Her phone chimed again. This time, instead of ignoring it, she pulled it out and opened the app. The message that appeared made her stop in her tracks. Compatibility match, 99.8%. Taewon Kim would like to connect. Haejin's thumb hovered over the profile picture. The man in the photo was striking. Tall, with features that seemed almost too perfect. His bio listed him as a researcher in genetic science, age 32, never married. What caught her attention wasn't his looks or his profession, but the way he had written his introduction. Formal, almost archaic in its politeness, yet somehow charming. Against her better judgment, she accepted the match. Their first messages were tentative. Taewon wrote with an elegance that seemed out of place on a dating app. He asked questions about her work, her thoughts on international law, and her views on human advancement. When he suggested meeting at Crystal Garden, one of Seoul's most exclusive restaurants, Haejin found herself saying yes. The evening of their date arrived faster than she expected. Haejin chose a simple black dress, one that made her feel confident without trying too hard. The taxi ride to Crystal Garden was a blur of streetlights and nervous anticipation. The restaurant's interior was bathed in soft blue light that seemed to pulse gently. Water features created a peaceful atmosphere, their sound mixing with the quiet murmur of conversations and the clink of expensive cutlery. A host led her to a private booth where Taewon was already waiting. He stood as she approached, and Haejin's first thought was that his profile picture hadn't done him justice. Taewon was tall, easily over 6 feet, with an ethereal grace to his movements that made him stand out even in this refined setting. His suit looked custom-made, the material catching the light in ways that seemed unusual. "Ms. Park," he said, his voice deep and melodious, "I am honored to finally meet you in person." As they sat down, Haejin noticed small details that seemed off. The way he held his chopsticks was precise, almost studied, as if he had learned it recently. His questions during dinner were structured like an interview, focusing on her physical health, her family's longevity, and her views on genetic engineering. "Have any of your immediate family members displayed exceptional physical or mental capabilities?" he asked while studying the menu with unusual intensity. Haejin laughed nervously. "My mother would say her ability to guilt-trip me into weekly visits is exceptional." Taewon's face remained serious. "Interesting. And what are your thoughts on interspecies relationships?" "You mean like owning pets?" Haejin asked, taking a sip of her wine. "Not exactly," he replied, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin tingle. "I mean more substantial connections between different kinds of beings." The conversation continued to drift into increasingly strange territory. Taewon asked about her views on space exploration, genetic modification, and whether she believed in life beyond Earth. His questions were oddly specific, yet he deflected most of her attempts to learn more about his own background. As the evening progressed, He-jin found herself both intrigued and unsettled. Taiwan was undeniably attractive and intelligent, but something about him felt different, almost alien. The way he moved, the careful precision of his speech, even the slight delay before he laughed at her jokes. Everything hinted at something more than just social awkwardness. When the dessert arrived, a spectacular creation that seemed to glow from within, Taiwan finally turned the conversation to more personal matters. "He-jin," he said, using her first name for the first time that evening, "would you be interested in meeting again? Perhaps somewhere more private. There are matters I would like to discuss with you that require discretion." Warning bells should have been ringing in He-jin's head. As a corporate lawyer, she had learned to spot red flags in both contracts and people. Yet something about Taiwan made her curious. Perhaps it was the mysterious glint in his eyes, or the way he seemed to know more than he was letting on. "I would like that," she heard herself say. As they parted ways outside the restaurant, Taiwan took her hand. His touch was cool and sent an electric tingle up her arm. "Thank you for a fascinating evening," he said. "I believe you will find our next meeting very enlightening." He-jin watched him walk away, his tall figure disappearing into the Seoul night. As she hailed a taxi home, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into something much bigger than a simple first date. Later that night, as she prepared for bed, He-jin noticed something strange on her phone. The Starlink app's terms of service had updated, and a new notification blinked at the top of her screen. Initial compatibility assessment complete. Phase 2 authorization pending. She fell asleep that night dreaming of stars and strange symbols, unaware that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The simple dating app on her phone wasn't just connecting hearts, it was building bridges between worlds. 3 days after their first date, He-jin sat in a quiet garden cafe, watching cherry blossoms drift past the window. She had chosen this place for their second meeting, a public space with enough privacy for the discreet matters Taiwan wanted to discuss. The cafe's soft jazz music and the gentle afternoon light created a peaceful atmosphere that helped calm her nerves. Taiwan arrived precisely on time, wearing another impeccably tailored suit that seemed to shift colors as he moved. He carried a sleek metallic briefcase that caught the light strangely, making He-jin blink several times to focus on it properly. "I trust you've had time to review the updated terms on your communication device," he asked as he sat down, placing the briefcase carefully on the table between them. He-jin nodded, though she hadn't actually read them thoroughly. Like most people, she had simply clicked accept when the notification appeared. "Yes, though I'm curious why a dating app needs such extensive terms of service." Taiwan's expression became serious. He glanced around the cafe, then pressed something on his watch. Suddenly, the ambient noise seemed to fade away, as if they were in their own private bubble. "He-jin," he began, his voice taking on a formal tone that made her sit up straighter. "What I'm about to tell you will change your understanding of reality. I ask only that you listen completely before responding." Her legal training kicked in, and she found herself automatically assessing his body language, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. But Taiwan's posture was perfect, his gaze steady and clear. "I am not, as you might have assumed, a genetic researcher from Seoul National University," he continued. "I am an ambassador from the Stellar Concordat, a federation of civilizations that spans 3 spiral arms of this galaxy." He-jin waited for him to smile, to indicate this was some elaborate joke. He didn't. "The application you know as Starlink is actually a diplomatic initiative. We've been searching for compatible partners across various species to strengthen genetic diversity in our population. Humans have particularly fascinating genetic markers that make you uniquely suited for this purpose." He opened the briefcase, revealing what looked like a holographic display. With a wave of his hand, images appeared in the air between them. Star maps, DNA sequences, and what appeared to be alien writing. When you accepted the terms of service 3 days ago, you actually agreed to a preliminary breeding contract. Your profile responses, combined with your genetic markers and professional background, made you an ideal candidate for our program. He-Jin's coffee cup clattered against its saucer as her hand trembled. I'm sorry, did you just say breeding contract? Taiwan nodded solemnly. Your specific genetic structure shows remarkable compatibility with our species. The chances of finding such a match are approximately 1 in 10 million. This is why the algorithm matched us with such high confidence. He-Jin's lawyer brain finally kicked into gear. This can't be legally binding. I didn't knowingly consent to any kind of breeding contract. Basic contract law requires informed consent and clear terms. A slight smile crossed Taiwan's face. Actually, under both Earth and Concordat law, the contract is quite valid. Would you like to see the relevant legal precedents? More holograms appeared, showing what looked like legal documents in multiple languages, including Korean. He-Jin leaned forward despite herself, her professional curiosity temporarily overriding her shock. The terms were written in a way that would be legally binding under multiple systems of law. Taiwan explained. We've had our legal experts studying Earth's various legal systems for decades to ensure compatibility. He-Jin took a deep breath, trying to process everything. So you're telling me that you're an alien, that dating app is actually a genetic matching program, and I've accidentally agreed to some sort of interspecies breeding contract. Correct on all counts, Taiwan replied. Though I should mention that my current appearance is a biological adaptation. My natural form would be less suited for walking around Seoul. As if to demonstrate, he briefly lifted his hand, and for a moment, his skin seemed to shimmer and become translucent, revealing something underneath that made He-Jin's eyes hurt to look at. Why me? She managed to ask, gripping her coffee cup like an anchor to reality. Your genetic profile shows exceptional markers for intelligence, adaptability, and resilience. Your legal background makes you ideal for understanding the complexities of interspecies relations. And he paused, looking almost embarrassed. Your responses to the personality assessment showed a remarkable openness to new experiences and different perspectives. He-Jin laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. So when you asked about interspecies relationships during dinner, I was trying to gauge your reaction to the concept, yes. Though I admit, I didn't expect you to think I was talking about pets. The absurdity of the situation finally hit her fully. Here she was, sitting in a cafe with an alien ambassador who had essentially catfished her through a dating app, discussing a breeding contract she had accidentally signed. What happens now? She asked, surprising herself with how calm she sounded. Taiwan's expression softened. That depends largely on you. While the preliminary contract is binding, we believe in informed consent for all final agreements. You have options, though I hope you'll consider proceeding with the arrangement. The potential benefits to both our species are significant. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out what looked like a crystal tablet. This contains complete information about the Concordat, our species, and the full terms of the agreement. I encourage you to review it carefully. We can meet again in 3 days to discuss your decision. He-Jin took the tablet, noting how it seemed to hum slightly in her hands. And if I decide not to proceed, then we part ways and you sign a non-disclosure agreement. Though I should mention that declining might have diplomatic implications, given the delicate nature of current Earth Concordat relations. He-Jin raised an eyebrow. Are you threatening me? Not at all, Taiwan replied quickly, merely providing context for your decision. The choice remains entirely yours. He stood, adjusting his suit. Take time to review the materials. And He-Jin, he paused, looking more human than he had all afternoon. For what it's worth, I truly enjoyed our dinner together. Not all compatibility is merely genetic. With that, he pressed his watch again, and the sounds of the cafe rushed back in. He-Jin watched him leave, the crystal tablet warm in her hands, her mind racing with questions and implications. As she sat there, a notification chimed on her phone. The Starlink app now showed a new status. Phase 2 documentation delivered. Review period initiated. He-Jin ordered another coffee, stronger this time, and opened the tablet. If she was going to make a decision about an interspecies breeding contract, she was going to do it the way she handled everything else, by reading all the fine print first. He-Jin hadn't slept in 36 hours. The crystal tablet from Taiwan lay on her coffee table, still projecting its soft blue light into her darkened apartment. Empty coffee cups and scattered notes covered every surface as she tried to make sense of the information she'd been given. The tablet contained thousands of pages about the stellar Concordat's history, biology, and legal system. What had started as a methodical legal review had turned into a desperate scramble to understand exactly what she had gotten herself into. Her normally tidy apartment looked like a war zone, with printouts of alien legal codes taped to the walls and sticky notes covered in her increasingly frantic handwriting. Her phone buzzed again, the 15th missed call from her mother. She had called in sick to work, something she'd never done before, claiming food poisoning. How could she possibly focus on corporate contracts when she had just learned that not only was humanity not alone in the universe, but that she had accidentally agreed to participate in an alien breeding program? The worst part was that she couldn't talk to anyone about it. The non-disclosure agreement she'd automatically accepted through the app was apparently backed by both Earth governments and alien law. Breaking it could result in consequences she didn't even want to think about. He-Jin ran her fingers through her disheveled hair and stared at the section about human genetic exceptionalism for the 10th time. According to the documents, humans possessed several unique genetic traits that made them valuable to other species. Their adaptability, resistance to radiation, and ability to survive in various environments were apparently rare in the galaxy. More importantly, human DNA could be successfully combined with many other species, producing offspring with enhanced capabilities. "This is insane," she muttered, pacing her living room. Completely insane. A soft chime from the tablet made her jump. A new message appeared in glowing text. Reminder: 36 hours remaining until response deadline. Would you like to schedule your follow-up meeting with Ambassador Taiwan? He-Jin ignored it, and instead pulled up the section about the Concordat's genetic program again. The more she read, the more her anxiety grew. The program had apparently been running for decades, with careful genetic matches being made across multiple species. The success stories were impressive. Diplomatic alliances strengthened, new medical breakthroughs achieved, and apparently healthy hybrid children born. But it was the section about Earth's involvement that really made her hands shake. Several world governments had apparently known about this program for years. They had agreed to allow the Concordat to operate discreetly, selecting compatible individuals through what appeared to be normal dating apps. In exchange, Earth received advanced technology and protection from less friendly alien species. He-Jin walked to her window, looking out at the Seoul skyline. How many of those twinkling lights were actually alien ships? How many other people had unknowingly agreed to similar contracts? Her doorbell rang, making her nearly jump out of her skin. Through the peephole, she saw her sister, Mi-Jin, standing there with a concerned expression. "He-Jin, I know you're in there. Mom's worried sick about you," Mi-Jin called through the door. He-Jin pressed her forehead against the cool wood of the door. "I'm fine. Just food poisoning. I need to rest." "Since when do you get food poisoning from Crystal Garden? That place is supposed to be the best in Seoul." "Let me in. I brought porridge." The mention of Crystal Garden made He-Jin's stomach flip. Had the restaurant been in on it too? Had everything about that first date been orchestrated? "Please, Mi-Jin, I just need some time alone," she called back, her voice cracking slightly. There was a pause, then Mi-Jin's voice came back, softer this time. "Is this about that guy you went out with? Did something happen?" He-Jin laughed hysterically. If only her sister knew just how much had happened. "It's complicated," she managed to say. "Complicated enough to make my perfect sister miss work for the first time ever. Come on, let me in. Whatever it is, we can figure it out together. He-Jin's hand moved toward the door lock, then stopped. The non-disclosure agreement had been very clear about the consequences of sharing information with anyone, even family members. The tablet on her coffee table pulsed with a soft warning light, as if sensing her thoughts. "I'm sorry," she said, both to her sister and to herself. "I just need some time. I'll call you tomorrow. I promise." She heard Mi-Jin sigh, then the sound of footsteps moving away from her door. As soon as she was sure her sister was gone, Ho-Jin slid down to sit on the floor, her back against the door. The tablet chimed again. 28 hours remaining until response deadline. He-Jin pulled out her phone and opened the Starlink app. Her conversation with Ta-Won was still there, looking deceptively normal. She scrolled back through their messages, looking for signs she should have noticed. The formal language, the specific questions about her family's health history, the careful way he had steered their conversations toward topics of genetics and space. A new message appeared from Ta-Won. "I sense your distress. Would you like to discuss your concerns?" He-Jin stared at the message for a long moment. How could he sense her distress? Was he monitoring her somehow? She looked around her apartment paranoidly, suddenly conscious of every shadow and corner. With trembling fingers, she typed back, "How many others are there? How many humans have agreed to this?" The response came quickly. "You are the 847th potential candidate from Earth, but only the third with genetic compatibility above 99%. Your specific markers make you uniquely valuable to the program." He-Jin felt her breath coming faster. 847 people. At least 846 others had gone through this same panic, this same revelation. Where were they now? What had they chosen? She forced herself to take deep breaths, trying to think like a lawyer instead of a terrified human being. There had to be a way out of this, some loophole or clause she could use. She crawled back to her coffee table and picked up the tablet again, determined to find something she had missed. As the night deepened outside her window, He-Jin dove back into the documents, her legal training warring with her rising panic. Somewhere in all these alien laws and regulations, there had to be an answer. There had to be a way to handle this that didn't involve either becoming an interstellar breeder or potentially causing a diplomatic incident. The tablet's soft blue light illuminated her determined face as she started her review again, this time with a new perspective. She wasn't just reading as a potential candidate anymore. She was reading as a lawyer looking for a way to protect her client. And in this case, she was her own client. The sun was rising over Seoul when He-Jin finally found what she was looking for. After nearly 2 days of intense study, countless cups of coffee, and meticulous note-taking, she had discovered something fascinating in the Concordet's legal framework. Her hand shook with exhaustion and excitement as she marked the relevant sections on the crystal tablet. With just 4 hours remaining until their deadline, she messaged Ta-Won. "I need to meet. Now. I have a counter-proposal." His response was immediate. "The Garden of Morning Calm. 1 hour." He-Jin rushed to make herself presentable, washing away 2 days of panic with cold water and fresh clothes. She gathered her notes, the tablet, and 3 separate data drives where she had backed up her findings. The taxi ride to the garden felt like it took forever, though the streets were still quiet in the early morning light. Ta-Won was already there, standing perfectly still among the flowering trees. Today he wore a dark blue suit that seemed to absorb the morning light. As He-Jin approached, she noticed a slight shimmer around him, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. "You haven't slept," he stated, not a question. "No," He-Jin replied, setting her materials on a nearby stone table. "I've been studying your laws, all of them, and I found something interesting." Ta-Won's expression remained neutral, but she noticed a slight change in the air around him. "Please continue." "The Concordet's breeding program is based on the Genetic Diversity Act of the 7th Galactic Cycle," He-Jin began, pulling up specific sections on the tablet. "But it's superseded by an older law, The Sentient Species Sovereignty Agreement. A flicker of something passed across Taiwan's face. You've been thorough. Under the Sovereignty Agreement, any sentient species retains the right to negotiate the terms of genetic exchange programs. The current breeding contracts are standardized, but they don't have to be. He Jin's voice grew stronger as she spoke. Earth never negotiated its own terms. We've just been accepting whatever the Concordat offered. Taiwan tilted his head slightly. This is correct, but the current agreements have been very successful. For the Concordat, He Jin interrupted, but not necessarily for humans. We're giving up our genetic advantages without getting equal value in return. She pulled up another document. Look at the exchange rates. Humans provide genetic material, carry hybrid children, and agree to relocate to Concordat space. In return, we get some technology and protection. But according to your own laws, we should be getting much more. Taiwan moved closer, his eyes scanning the documents she had highlighted. You're proposing a renegotiation of the entire program. Yes, He Jin said firmly. Starting with my own contract. I've drafted a new agreement that could serve as a template for future human Concordat partnerships. She handed him a data chip. This includes provisions for knowledge exchange, cultural integration programs, and most importantly, equal rights for human partners and any hybrid offspring. Taiwan examined the chip, his fingers moving in strange patterns over its surface. This is unexpected. I'm a lawyer, He Jin said simply. This is what I do. And if I'm going to consider being part of this program, I want to make sure it's fair for everyone involved. To her surprise, Taiwan smiled. A real smile, not the careful expression he usually wore. The reports of human adaptability were not exaggerated. Instead of running away or simply accepting the terms, you found a third option. Does that mean you'll consider my proposal? I'll do more than consider it. I'll present it to the Concordat Council immediately. He paused, looking at her with new respect. Though I should warn you, this could make you a very important figure in human Concordat relations. He Jin straightened her shoulders. I can handle it, but I have one condition that's non-negotiable. Yes, no more deception. If we're going to do this, we need to be completely honest with each other. No more hiding behind dating apps or pretending to be something we're not. Taiwan nodded slowly. Agreed. In that spirit, would you like to see my true form? He Jin took a deep breath. Yes, I think it's time. The air around Taiwan began to shimmer more intensely. His human appearance seemed to ripple and fade, revealing something beneath that made He Jin's eyes strain to understand. He was still humanoid, but his skin was iridescent, shifting colors like an oil slick. His eyes were larger, with multiple pupils that moved independently. This is who I really am, he said, his voice now carrying harmonics that made the air vibrate. He Jin forced herself to look directly at him, fighting against her brain's attempt to make sense of what she was seeing. Thank you for showing me, she managed to say. Taiwan shifted back to his human appearance. Most humans find our natural form difficult to process. Your reaction is admirably controlled. Well, He Jin said with a small smile, if we're going to be negotiating new terms for interspecies relations, I should probably get used to it. They spent the next several hours going through her proposal in detail. He Jin explained each modification she had made to the standard contract, drawing on both Earth's legal traditions and the Concordat's own laws. Taiwan offered insights into Concordat politics and suggested refinements that would make the proposal more acceptable to the Council. As the garden began to fill with morning visitors, Taiwan activated some kind of privacy field around them, making their corner of the garden appear empty to others. There's one more thing, He Jin said, pulling out a final document. If we're going to change how these arrangements work, we need to be more open with Earth's governments. No more hiding behind dating apps. Proper diplomatic channels, proper negotiations. That could be complicated, Taiwan admitted. There are reasons we've kept our presence limited. I understand that. But if we're talking about genetic exchange programs, people deserve to know what they're getting into. We can handle the truth. Tai-1 studied her for a long moment. You continue to surprise me. He-Jin Park. When I was assigned to this mission, I never expected to find someone who would challenge our entire approach. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Very good, he replied. The Concordat values innovation and adaptation. Your proposal could improve our relations with all species, not just humans. He-Jin felt a weight lift from her shoulders. So what happens now? Now, Tai-1 said, standing, I take your proposal to the council. And you? He paused, looking at her with concern. You should get some sleep. The next few days will be very busy. As He-Jin gathered her materials, she realized something had changed. The panic that had consumed her for the past 2 days was gone, replaced by a sense of purpose. She wasn't just a victim of circumstance anymore. She was actively shaping the future of human-alien relations. Tai-1, she called as he turned to leave. Thank you for being willing to listen. He turned back, his form shimming slightly in the morning light. Thank you for showing us a better way. Perhaps this is why our genetic compatibility is so high. We both seek to build bridges between worlds. He-Jin watched him disappear among the trees, then checked her phone. She had dozens of missed calls and messages, a mountain of work to catch up on, and now a potentially galaxy-changing legal negotiation to prepare for. But first, she needed sleep. As she hailed a taxi home, she couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. She had wanted to start dating again, and somehow ended up negotiating interstellar treaties instead. Life, it seemed, had a strange way of exceeding expectations. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of meetings, legal documents, and cultural exchanges. He-Jin found herself splitting her time between her regular corporate law work and what she now thought of as her cosmic law practice. Today, she sat in a hidden conference room 50 floors below Seoul, watching Tai-1 explain Concordat customs to her through a series of holographic displays. So your species doesn't actually eat food? He-Jin asked, fascinated by the strange images floating before her. We absorb energy directly, Tai-1 explained, his human disguise slightly less perfect now that they were alone. The dining experience I shared with you was purely for cultural integration purposes. He-Jin laughed. That explains why you kept studying the menu like it was a legal document. You had no idea what any of it was, did you? I had extensive briefings on human cuisine, he replied, a hint of defensiveness in his voice. Though I admit, the concept of voluntarily consuming spicy substances remains puzzling. Their meetings had become more relaxed since she presented her contract revisions to the Concordat Council. To her surprise, the Council had not only accepted her proposals, but had requested her help in reforming their approaches to other species as well. Tell me about your world, He-Jin said, pushing aside the stack of documents they were supposed to be reviewing. Not the official history. I want to know what it's really like. Tai-1's form shimmed slightly as he considered her request. Then he touched a control on his wrist device, and the room around them transformed. Suddenly, they were standing on the surface of an alien world. The sky was a deep purple, with 3 moons hanging like jewels above strange crystal formations that stretched toward the heavens. This is where I grew up, he said, his voice carrying those haunting harmonics that He-Jin had grown to appreciate. The crystal plains of Nexus Prime. He-Jin reached out to touch one of the crystal structures, her hand passing through the hologram. It's beautiful, she breathed. We live within the crystals, he explained. They conduct the energy we need and serve as natural communication networks. Each formation you see is actually a city. As he spoke about his home, He-Jin noticed his human disguise slipping further, revealing more of his true form. She no longer found it disturbing. In fact, she had begun to see its own kind of beauty in the way light played across his iridescent skin. What about families? She asked. How do your people raise children? The holographic environment shifted to show the interior of a crystal structure. Energy beings moved through the space, some of them clearly smaller than others. Our young require care from the entire community, Taiwan explained. They need to learn to process different energy frequencies, to maintain their form, to communicate across the crystal networks. That's why the breeding program is so important to your people, He-Jin realized. You're not just looking for genetic diversity. You're looking for new ways to adapt and grow. Taiwan nodded. Our species has reached certain limitations. We can no longer evolve on our own. Human genetics offer possibilities we never imagined. He-Jin thought about this as she watched the holographic children playing with energy streams. But that's not the only reason you're here, is it? No, Taiwan admitted. We're also here because we're curious. Humans are fascinating to us. You feel so much, change so quickly, adapt to almost anything. You're chaotic and emotional, and completely unpredictable. Everything we're not. Is that why you chose me? He-Jin asked, turning to look at him directly. Because I'm unpredictable. I chose you because you see patterns others miss. Because you can take complex systems and find ways to make them work better. He paused, his multiple pupils focusing on her. And yes, because you surprised me. You still do. The holographic environment faded, leaving them back in the conference room. He-Jin felt a strange mix of emotions, wonder at what she'd seen, pride at his words, and something else she wasn't quite ready to name. There's something else I need to show you, Taiwan said, his tone growing serious. He produced another crystal tablet and handed it to her. What is this? Records of the first human concordat hybrids. I think you should understand exactly what might be possible. He-Jin activated the tablet, and images appeared before her. Children who looked mostly human but had faint iridescent patterns on their skin, eyes that shifted colors, and abilities that defied explanation. They're healthy, she asked, studying the data. More than healthy. They represent the best of both species, but raising them requires understanding both cultures, both ways of life. He hesitated. That's why I wanted you to see my world, to understand who we really are. He-Jin set down the tablet, her mind racing with implications. This isn't just about genetics anymore, is it? We're talking about creating a bridge between two completely different forms of life. Yes, Taiwan said simply. That's why your contract revisions were so important. You understood instinctively that this had to be about more than just biological compatibility. They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. He-Jin realized that somewhere along the way, this had stopped being just a legal problem to solve. She had become invested in not just the outcome, but in understanding Taiwan and his people. Show me more, she said finally. I want to understand everything. Your customs, your beliefs, your ways of thinking. If we're going to build this bridge, we need to know exactly what we're connecting. Taiwan's form brightened slightly, his species equivalent of a smile. There's so much to share. Where would you like to begin? And so their scheduled review of legal documents turned into something else entirely. A deep dive into two vastly different ways of existing in the universe. As Taiwan showed her more of his world, and she explained more of hers, He-Jin began to understand that their differences weren't obstacles to overcome, but opportunities to grow. The lines between professional meetings and personal conversations began to blur. Their discussions ranged from the profound to the mundane. How his people perceived time, why humans enjoyed music, the complexities of translating emotions across species barriers. As the day drew to a close, He-Jin realized she had learned more about the universe in these few hours than she had in all her years of education. But more importantly, she had begun to understand Taiwan not just as an alien ambassador or a potential genetic partner, but as a person, albeit a very different kind of person than she had ever known before. Same time tomorrow? She asked as they prepared to leave. Actually, Taiwan said, his form shifting slightly in what she now recognized as uncertainty, I was wondering if you would like to visit one of our ships. See some of these things for yourself, rather than just in holograms. He-Jin felt her heart rate increase. Is that allowed under the current agreements? It is under the new ones you helped create, he replied, with what might have been a touch of pride in his harmonic voice. She smiled. Then yes, I would like that very much. As they parted ways, He-Jin realized that what had started as an accidental contract had become something far more interesting. A genuine attempt to understand and connect with a completely different form of life. And somehow that seemed far more important than any breeding program could ever be. The sleek Concordat vessel hung invisibly above Seoul, its cloaking technology hiding it from Earth's most advanced detection systems. He-Jin stood at one of its observation windows, watching her city sparkle below like scattered stars. After 3 months of regular visits to the ship, she still couldn't get over the view. Behind her, Taiwan was engaged in a heated discussion with the Concordat Council's holographic projections. His true form flickered with agitation as he presented the latest round of treaty modifications. The human governments are asking for more transparency, he argued, his harmonics sharp with frustration. They've discovered 3 other species running similar programs on Earth. If we don't adapt our approach, we risk losing everything we've built. He-Jin turned from the window, watching the council members' energy patterns pulse with what she had learned to recognize as concern. Over the past months, she'd gotten better at reading Concordat expressions and emotions, just as Taiwan had become more attuned to human ones. The other programs must be shut down, one council member declared, their form blazing with authority. Earth is under our protection. That's not your decision to make, He-Jin interjected, stepping forward. Earth needs to choose its own path. That's what my revisions to the agreement are all about. The council members turned their attention to her, their multiple pupils contracting. They had grown used to her direct approach, even if it sometimes unsettled them. You've become quite the advocate for your species, He-Jin Park, another council member observed, perhaps too much so. Remember, you still have a personal contract to fulfill. He-Jin felt Taiwan's energy field brush against hers protectively. That was new. This ability to sense his presence, to feel the subtle shifts in his energy. The doctor said it was a side effect of her extended exposure to Concordat technology, but she suspected there was more to it. My personal contract is exactly why I'm fighting for these changes, she replied firmly. I'm not just negotiating for Earth. I'm negotiating for my own future, and the future of any children that might come from these arrangements. The mention of children brought a heavy silence to the chamber. It was the heart of the matter. After all, the Concordat needed human genetics to survive, to evolve. But at what cost? The Council will consider your proposals, the first member finally said. But we require your final decision regarding your personal contract within 3 Earth days. The holograms flickered out, leaving He-Jin and Taiwan alone in the observation chamber. He shifted back to his human form, a gesture she had come to recognize as consideration for her comfort, even though she had grown used to his true appearance. 3 days, she said softly, looking back at the city below. They're not making this easy. They're afraid, Taiwan admitted, moving to stand beside her. Afraid of change, afraid of losing control. Your proposals would fundamentally alter how we interact with other species. He-Jin pressed her hand against the cool window. I need to tell my family. That would violate current protocols. Current protocols are about to change, she interrupted. And I can't make this decision without talking to them. They deserve to know why their daughter might be leaving Earth to have hybrid children with an energy being. Taiwan was quiet for a moment, his human form flickering slightly at the edges. Your sister already suspects something. I've monitored her internet searches. He-Jin turned to him sharply. You've been watching my family. Protecting them, he corrected. Standard procedure for potential partners. Mi-Jin has been researching alien contact theories and interspecies breeding programs. She's quite thorough. Despite the seriousness of the situation, He-Jin laughed. Of course she has. She always said I was too picky about dating. Wait until she finds out just how picky I really was. Her laughter faded as she thought about her parents, her career, everything she might have to leave behind. The modified contract she'd created would allow her to return to Earth regularly, to maintain her connections here. But things would never be the same. What about us? She asked quietly, turning to face Taiwan. Is this still just a diplomatic arrangement to you? His human disguise fell away completely, his true form glowing softly in the dimness of the observation chamber. You know it's not. These past months, watching you fight for your people, seeing how you've adapted to understanding us, it's become much more than an arrangement. He Jin felt that familiar tingle when his energy field brushed against hers again. She had stopped fighting these moments of connection, these hints of what might be possible between their species. I need to go home, she said finally. I need to talk to my family, to think about all of this away from here. Taiwan nodded, already moving to activate the transport system. 3 days, Heijin Park. Whatever you decide, know that you've already changed both our worlds. The journey back to her apartment was a blur of thoughts and emotions. As she walked through her front door, she found Mai Jin sitting on her couch, surrounded by printouts and open laptop screens. So, her sister said without looking up, when were you going to tell me that your boyfriend is an alien? He Jin stopped short, her heart pounding. How did you? Please, Mai Jin interrupted, finally meeting her eyes. I'm a data analyst. I notice patterns. Your mysterious boyfriend appears right when that new dating app launches. You start missing family dinners. You're suddenly involved in classified government meetings. And then there's this. She held up her phone, showing a photo of He Jin and Taiwan in the garden of morning calm. For the next several hours, He Jin told her sister everything. The accidental contract, the negotiations, the changes she was fighting for, and the choice she now faced. Mai Jin listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes or pulling up relevant research on her computer. Mom and Dad are going to freak out, Mai Jin finally said when He Jin finished speaking. I know, but they'll support you. We all will. Mai Jin reached over and squeezed her hand. You've always been the sensible one, the careful one. If you believe this is right, then it probably is. He Jin felt tears welling up in her eyes. I don't know if it's right. I just know it feels important. Like I'm supposed to be part of this, supposed to help make it better. Then that's your answer, isn't it? Mai Jin said simply. You've never backed down from making things better, even when it was hard. Why start now? Looking at her sister's confident smile, He Jin felt something settle in her chest. The choice wasn't just about her anymore, or even about the Concordat. It was about building bridges, about making sure these first steps between worlds were taken thoughtfully, carefully, with respect for all involved. Her phone chimed softly, a message from Taiwan. The council is ready to hear your decision whenever you are. Well, He Jin said, standing up and straightening her shoulders, want to help me tell our parents that their grandchildren might glow in the dark. Mai Jin laughed and stood up beside her. Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss this for the world. As they prepared to leave, He Jin took one last look around her apartment. Whatever she decided in the next 3 days would change everything, not just for her, but for both her worlds. Somehow, that thought wasn't as frightening as it used to be. Finally, the senior member spoke again. The council accepts your terms, Heijin Park. Your modifications will become the new standard for all human Concordat relations. Relief flooded through her, but she wasn't finished. There's one more thing. She took a deep breath. I want to help implement these changes, not just as a participant in the program, but as Earth's official representative to the Concordat. This caused another stir among the council members. Taiwan's energy field pulsed with surprise. She hadn't told him about this part of her plan. Explain, the senior member commanded. You need someone who understands both worlds, He Jin said. someone who can help other humans navigate this transition, who can work with Earth's governments to implement the new protocols. I've already discussed it with our officials. They agree. She pulled up one final document, her new diplomatic credentials, issued jointly by Earth's governments and the Concordat Council. You've thought of everything, Tadawun said softly, his harmonics carrying a note of admiration. I am a lawyer, she reminded him with a smile. It's my job to think of everything. The council deliberated briefly before the senior member moved forward. We accept your role as Earth's representative. The ceremony will be conducted according to both human and Concordat traditions. As the council members began discussing logistics, Ho-Jin felt Tadawun's energy field envelop hers completely, their equivalent of an embrace. In his true form, his emotions were clear to her: joy, pride, and something deeper that transcended both their species' understanding of love. Later that evening, Ho-Jin stood in her apartment, packing the last of her things. She would maintain her home on Earth, but much of her time would be spent traveling between worlds, helping to build the bridge she had envisioned. Mei-Jin sat on her bed, watching her fold clothes. So when can I expect to be an aunt to glowing babies? Ho-Jin threw a pillow at her sister. That's not how it works, and you know it. Besides, Taiwan, and I had a lot of work to do first. But you love him, Mei-Jin said, not a question but a statement. Ho-Jin paused, thinking about the connection she shared with Tadawun, the way their energy fields intertwined, the deep understanding that had grown between them. Yes, she said simply, in ways I never imagined possible. Good. Mei-Jin stood and hugged her sister, because I already designed a nursery that can accommodate both human and energy-based life forms. Ho-Jin laughed, holding her sister tight. Of course you did. A soft chime indicated Tadawun's arrival. He appeared in his human form, a courtesy to Mei-Jin, though she had insisted she was fine with his true appearance. Ready? He asked, looking at Ho-Jin with eyes that shifted between human and Concordat. Ho-Jin looked around her apartment one last time, at her sister's encouraging smile, at the city lights twinkling beyond her window. She thought about the path that had brought her here, from a simple dating app to the brink of changing two worlds. Yes, she said, picking up her bag. I'm ready. As they prepared to transport to the ship, Mei-Jin called out, Don't forget, Mom expects both of you for Sunday dinner. She's learning to cook energy-compatible food. Ho-Jin smiled as the transport beam enveloped them. She had started this journey thinking she had accidentally agreed to a breeding contract. Instead, she had found a way to bridge worlds, change lives, and find love in the most unexpected place possible. As they materialized in their quarters aboard the ship, Taiwan shifted to his true form, his energy field immediately seeking hers. Below them, Earth spun peacefully, while above, the stars beckoned with possibilities. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, she said, watching their worlds merge in the viewport. Yes, Taiwan agreed, his harmonics carrying hope and determination. But we'll do it together. Ho-Jin reached out, letting her energy field merge with his, no longer afraid of the differences between them. Sometimes the best contracts weren't the ones you signed, but the ones you chose to create yourself. And as the ship prepared to depart for Concordat space, Ho-Jin knew she had made the right choice. She wasn't just building a bridge between worlds. She was becoming the bridge herself, and somehow, that felt exactly right. The end.